Hello. So my name is Cullen Elwell, and this is my capstone presentation artifact. Uh, my capstone is called Planning for a Better Sustainable Future. ESG focused versus master planning and aligning with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So, um, my capstone primarily focuses on how um, small rural schools, such as Landmark College, have trouble sometimes in developing sustainable goals and also keeping to them. In addition, um, sustainability has changed a lot within the periods from the late 90s into the mid 2010s, and then another bigger period, um, 2015 into the present, on how people think differently about sustainability and what sustainability should include. So, with that said, let's get this started. So, uh, my artifact will specifically look at Landmark College's Sustainable Development Plan uh, from, in the version that is listed in the corner there, says draft April 7th, 2014. For this presentation, I will be using the second draft of January 4th, 2015. This draft is primarily a guiding document, and this document describes itself as a working document that is made to be developed and changed over time. With that, it does have some pros and cons. Some schools still primarily use this ESG, which is also called, um, sorry, which is referred to as the triple bottom line, which has also turned into the term ESG as businesses primarily use ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance practices in how they use guiding documents and also govern their organizations. But I will get into that further. But for more context, uh, I will be comparing them against more modern ways of thinking about sustainable development goals and comparing how presently colleges in the United States and universities who tend to be in big urban areas as opposed to rural small colleges, how there is much difference when it comes to um, planning and implementing these goals. So moving forward, um, I am not comparing the current framework of the current Landmark College strategic plan as it is also being updated, because currently we have a new interim president, and with that new interim president is focusing on how they can do their best to make sure that Landmark College focuses on different items, and how they really have a big focus on holistically how Landmark is currently doing good at and currently not doing the best at, and compared to the previous administration. And they're using, because they're the current interim president, they have that focus in helping us find a new president of the college. So, planning and ESG. So, I did a lot of research into how colleges focus on planning and strategic planning. Planning also goes into um, how the physical environment is planned, but also how the organizational aspect of the governing body is planned, and how the governing body implements different goals and tasks that they need to implement. So um, Cox laid out in this specific item I have shown uh, broadly different factors that go into the physical planning in how campuses go about planning, and those three aspects in general. I really liked um, other artifacts I read by them as it went along with planning and sustainability. Um, this document also came around the time in 2015 of a different change in framework on how um, sustainability is thought of, and also around the time the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals appeared. Um, ESG, in comparison, um, was a concept that originally developed in 1994 by John Ellington, and primarily originated in focusing on how uh, governing entities, not just for businesses, but all types of business and organizations, can focus on how they affect the greater world around them, and how they play a factor, and how investing where your money goes plays a huge factor in where things flow and how humans affect the world. So ESG is focusing on environmental, social, and economic factors that go into planning, and is also referred to as the triple bottom line. And it transforms differently in different organizations, and how different uh, businesses go about planning. So, a modern 20, 2020 or 2024 example of that um, might be how uh, politics, for example, so they might use uh, instead of environmental is a very broad term, they might focus on uh, environmental, social, and economic, social, and political. So businesses have become more political too. So they sometimes use the triple bottom line and switch it out with different factors that um, might benefit their business, or how that business or organization wants to um, affect the world in their terms. Um, the Sustainable Development Goals were developed by the United Nations in 2015, and the goal with these sustainable development goals is help to create a greater umbrella um, on how, as humans, and it primarily focus on developing countries, can um, target their focuses and also teach new generations on how to govern and what factors go into um, governing or helping in development of a country. Um, it has been used uh, not in a biased way, but uh, it's primarily used in developing countries. But uh, when they were originally created, they also had a focus on how different cities in uh, in the United States and Europe and other parts of the world um, can use this form of governing style to help organize their thoughts and how to better problem solve in completing these goals. Now, I've seen a few examples of how colleges use the sustainable development goals along with municipalities in primarily Europe are very um, into using this planning framework. But in the United States, beyond large cities, um, this framework has not um, been used as a tool for planning. So I tend to focus on how we can move away from other forms of planning like ESG, triple bottom line, into more um, contemporary forms of planning and sustainability and sustainable development, because lots of different factors go into sustainable planning, and um, it is very hard to differentiate different action items down. So, and also with planning documents for sustainable development goals, they do a really good job of tracking items and also matching items that also go together. So um, ESG might heavily lean on um, infrastructure, and which is number 9, and then also um, 16, which focuses on justice and strong institutions. And so a lot of institutions want to do the best they can to be a very diplomatic governing institution. And so they really want to focus on those two primary goals. But that also leaves the other pieces of um, the pie out of the picture. And because the world is complicated, it's our job to be good stewards, and also because this is towards educational institutions, how educational institutions can better uh, focus on different areas in teaching people how to be the best problem solvers they can be. So before I go into uh, Landmark College's sustainability plan, I wanted to bring up a couple organizations that currently exist, such as the Association for Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. Um, this organization was started around 2005, 2005, 2006, 2007, and their primary focus was um, creating a uh, more universal tracking system on how colleges can separate these different items that go into um, sustainability and development, and how they can better improve their goals and track their goals. It's a little bit biased towards large institutions because of various reasons, because it primarily focuses on um, what would be described in the UN Sustainable Development Goals as uh, area number 9 and area number 12 and 11, but does not lean into um, other areas as well. So it's not that looking looking at that critically, it does not focus on other pieces of the pie, but it focuses primarily on one piece of the pie and really excels in that. But it tends to be biased towards other organizations. And I tried reaching out to this organization to get better guidelines and information on what specifically other institutions are tracked, and they um, I needed to subscribe to their organization, and I didn't really have any people I could talk to directly from that organization to better understand and compare the goals they focus on. And so that is one thing that is missing from my personal information that I would like to maybe learn more about. And if I had a chance to expand my capstone, uh, maybe I would go that route. So I'm going to take a quick break before I proceed. So I'm going to, along with AASHE, was I looked at how other schools do planning and sustainability planning. So I looked at and talked to a lot of schools. So I primarily talked to Harvard University in their sustainability office. I talked to Brown University for this project, and I talked to UMass Boston's planning and uh, their planning department when it comes to developing um, how they do planning and how they go about implementing their goals and keeping their organizations on the right track. This diagram shown here is how Yale University focuses on their master plan and sustainability plan and vision, and how they organize their vision. So they focused and also implemented a lot of uh, tactics, uh, lots of tactics that are implemented in the real world when it comes to planning that I learned also throughout this process. And having a end goal in mind within their vision, but also having a broader ambition and what they wanted to do. And it is very good when organizations have goals within their goals to help break things down over time to make things happen, to put it simply. And I very much liked their vision statement and how they wanted to implement their statement. Uh, there is also some bias in this plan, and it doesn't necessarily adhere to the United Nations Sustainable Development Models because um, while Yale is a major entity in the region that they live in, they do not do much in helping in developing the region that they live in, which is a big piece of the pie that is broadly implemented within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but is not listed here as a item for for reasons that only um, Yale can look at for themselves. But that just brings up the question of are colleges and universities supposed to be community members within the organizations that they live in, or should they be focusing primarily on themselves? Um, I can't answer that question, but I lean towards a holistic approach in how schools do planning and how schools might develop a sustainability plan that is holistic in implementing and trying to build goals, multifaceted goals. So that is not the end. So I am going to now take you to Landmark Sustainability Master Plan. So here is Landmark College's sustainability plan, um, drafted April 7th, 2014, and redrafted January 4th, 2015. So I will go through a couple items um, whilst we go through and evaluate this document. So it starts with a preamble about sustainability and what sustainability is and how it can be outlined in Landmark's strategic plan. Um, the plan in context. So the plan in context focuses on how Landmark College can use um, to summarize the AASCH organizational planning as seen here. This organization in implementing and tracking their goals in order to be a better planner and develop a better goal setter. Um, so the goals they focus on um, include energy, fuels, water, transportation. Um, this paragraph here specifies when um, the to put it simply, the University of New Hampshire aided in developing the AASCH standards. Um, and so this plan goes into uh, talking about how at the organizational level, how the college can implement this plan. And uh, before I go on to the plan objectives, um, I want to restate my goal, which is to um, compare and contrast to see if the um, ESG model is the best plan or the best tool to implement um, these sustainability goals, and also compare it to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how they might each take a different approach to both planning and both implementing the goals. And so that is my criteria, and I will also give um, some commentary to in a very objective way on how Landmark has implemented or not implemented, and also trying to academically theorize why they might not have been implemented and how the school using different governing tactics, how they can achieve the goal in either a ESG way or using the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So, um, one thing I liked about the planning objectives is they started with the end in mind. So, uh, reduce consumption of fuels and resources, research energy sources that um, that the college could use, um, and identify and support resources where they might be needed towards initiatives, and also educating the community and promoting behavior changes that serve sustainability. Um, I just like how these goals are directly listed out. Um, and here we get into ESG and how um, they are using ESG as a guiding template to look at and implement these goals. So, so this plan tells us how Landmark will use the ESG goals and how they can be detailed in a broad way to fit the Landmark model of governance. Because Landmark is a small institution, and it's like some small institutions, everyone has many different hats to wear. And so, one benefit of this ESG modeling is different entities can focus on broad areas, while maybe at a bigger institution, there can be more specialization in implementing some of these goals. So, it details what the plan is, what the model and academic theory they are using, um, how they will use it, and then number 3 here is very interesting to me. Define the tools that will be used, whether they are studies from outside entities, in-house information, records, any sources, national or state resources, such as the AA, the AASHE, and their STARS program, and also how the state of Vermont does tracking and engaging in colleges. My main criticism, my main critique about this section is a year after Landmark became a member of AASHE, they decided to opt out of AASHE, and a lot of these goals became implemented or tracked differently within a within the school's strategic plan. And there are many pros and cons to that. There is flexibility, but also for a pro for the ESG model, but as a con, there is lack of structure and also follow through with some of these goals in mind. So, with that said, here is how the college focuses on defining the ESG goals. So, maintaining and acting upon an awareness of both our immediate surroundings as well as our global environment. So, that can refer to planning, how Landmark does planning. That can also refer to uh, the ecological environment. That can refer to many things and how Landmark fits within this world and framework. That could even be referring to how Landmark does um, neurodivergent advocacy or working with the community. It also does not address um, defining environment as my critique, and could be more specified as instead of broad, especially when defining their terms and how they choose to solve them. So, social, pres- preserving or enhancing the welfare of the college community and such surrounding Putney community while preserving the environment. That is also a very broad term, and also economic, investing in tested approaches and strategies to provide return on investment while realizing vital sustainability objectives. That is also very broad and very not so defined in how the college will specifically use and implement those. So, in a United Nations model, um, if this goal were to be changed, it would better specify how Landmark better integrates with different goals in mind for planning and future planning and future development of Landmark College as a organization. So moving on, I will not go through every item one by one, but I just want to focus on a lot of key items. But before I do that, I want to um, give some context to um, environmental goals as far as they relate to ecological or the other things that Landmark has done over the past years post this document. So, Landmark has focused on, or at one time had a focus on, uh, forestry and how the forest and the land outside the direct campus affects the campus, and had programs such as Tree USA and other things. Landmark has also developed compost program, which will be talked about later. And but prior to this document, Landmark has also looked at other things, such as a study in two studies in 2011, focusing on goals such as um, theor- a theoretical white paper on if Landmark used biomass heating as a way to focus on its energy goals, uh, because a lot of the dorms and buildings on campus, their footprint primarily relies on propane heating for energy. And for transportation, Landmark in 2011 took part in a program for the town and the region surrounding Brattleboro, Vermont, on better bus transportation planning. At the time, there were two bus agencies that were slowly developing and growing at the time, and the town of Brattleboro was also growing at the time, and their primarily focus was um, how to better integrate transit within the region. And uh, eventually, those talks uh, didn't get very far, but the current transportation agency merged into another transportation agency. So prior to this document, I wanted to state that Landmark has done things and is currently doing things, um, as far as the environment, and also um, using resources to better um, have a better environmental footprint. All right. With that said, we will go into the this section. And so, what I will talk about in this section is um, maintaining a specific goal that was implemented and laid out, was maintaining a yearly membership with AASCH and other sustainably based agencies, and evaluating and integrating their best practices when feasible and warranted. Um, Feasible and warranted are very unsecure words in this specific statement and goal, and leave it very broad and open-ended for how it might be interpreted in both models, of both a ESG planning model and um, a UN Sustainable Development Goals way. So, as stated um, prior, AASCH primarily focuses on using the Sustainable Development Goals as a guiding picture, is uh, their seventh goal, um, affordable and clean energy. Their eighth goal, economic growth. Their ninth goal, primarily focusing on infrastructure. And their 11th and 12th goal. So their 11th goal is about sustainable communities and cities, and their 12th goal is about um, creating more of a circular responsibility in how products are made and distributed and changed. And also their 13th goal, which is climate action. In the greater realm of universities having sustainability offices, a goal that they have in mind, restated in another section, is community education and also publication of sustainability, um, as opposed to having more heavier governance and creating and implementing these goals and changing people's minds about these goals. With all that said, a year after Landmark became a member of this organization, uh, they did not renew their membership. And so, after going through the process of creating various goals and check marks in comparison to the score sheet, they decided not to go the path of using the score sheet. Which is disappointing because there is not another um, model that Landmark is currently using as a scorecard to compare their sustainable development goals or even their infrastructure improvement goals, besides modernizing when modernizing needs to occur. Uh, the Board of Trustees, as of this recording 12/12, they are creating an infrastructure committee to better focus on the long-term planning of Landmark's need for infrastructure improvements and development. So, hopefully, with that in mind, Landmark might return to developing and having a way to scorecard their specific development goals and how they build a better school. Moving on from that, I wanted to talk about another goal, which was research and identify approaches to reduce the college's dependency on fossil fuel. So, commit to a progressive yearly capital investment to replace outdated mechanical equipment with a measurable goal to decrease dependency on fossil fuel and attain cost savings of 20% over the current yearly fuel cost, KPI, while delivering better comfort and efficiency. So, objectively, Landmark has made improvements to develop and decrease their dependency on fossil fuel, such as when building the STEM building and also upgrading the boilers as recent check marks in their goal. One thing that I objectively think Landmark in Vermont should work on is reducing fossil fuel um, need and dependency, especially when it comes to Landmark's fleet of vehicles. Um, as time moves along um, energy efficient vehicles, um, whether if they are hybrid or electric, they can be slowly phased into the fleet, and maybe having a plan for how they maintain their fleet of both um, facilities or um, campus safety or uh, bus transportation vehicles, especially since the current fleet of bus transportation vehicles is growing. And there will always be a need to um, turn over vehicles, and having a plan when a vehicle might reach the end of its lifespan to replace the vehicle with a more energy efficient one. Um, and the school has not had that in mind when replacing fleet vehicles. Um, After having conversations and looking at how the school does procurement for purchasing vehicles, um, having things in mind such as reducing fossil fuel need. Vermont is also notoriously bad as it comes to fossil fuel um, dependency because Landmark is within a rural state and Vermont is a rural state. Um, People drive. There is public transportation. It is not as frequent, and other forms of regional transportation exist, but not within large capacity. So maybe advocating for expanding those alternative regional transportation needs. And one thing I think Landmark could do is ask the state to have a fixed route. Um, Having a fixed route bus service that better serves the greater region, and also helps in obtaining goals that the state of Vermont has set out for itself that include reducing uh, hydrocarbons and fuel of transportation by having more services that um, expand the economic development and sustainability and environmental sustainability of the region that we live in. Um, Before earlier, I also talked about um, how the college has looked at different forms of alternative energy in the past, but having a plan where Landmark can generate and also uh, export its own energy, or maybe even be a facility to store um, energy in the future, as that those could be possible um, more modern and continuously developing ways that Landmark can contribute to both the community and to the region as a whole, especially because um, Landmark currently buys a lot of its energy from a solar plant um, that is currently located in Brattleboro, and that is a capped on top of a capped dump site. So that I find really interesting in a way that Landmark can focus on their goals as far as energy. And that relates to ESG by focusing on both the financial piece of the circle and also the uh, economic side of the circle. So, um, following that, um, developing a range of cross and co-curricular instructional opportunities for students on campus as part of the academic curriculum. Um, I do think that Landmark um, set this goal in mind um, without any follow-up action items. We did have the Tree USA program, and I personally would like that to continue. And we have a garden club and a rebuilding environmental um, biology program. But there can be a lot more done to focus on this goal and having it be part of the greater um, planning and curriculum of Landmark. And that can appear in different ways. That could be, that can appear within um, all the different areas of all in any single academic area that can be done. And one way Landmark could also do that, besides focusing or having cross cross curricular classes, is maybe having group collaborative classes or student training events. Um, and beyond general awareness, also developing and creating structures within the governance of Landmark on how to deal with um, different topics that students find passionate that have included um, solid waste management, um, reducing having having health access to water bottle filling stations and water stations on campus, and just giving them the toolkit to go into jobs within sustainability, as that is a item in students' toolkits that will be needed moving into the future. So moving on, speaking of investing in water fountains and recycling, so um, currently there is no plan to eliminate plastics on campus, as plastics are a huge, along with fuel, a huge contributor to the environment if they were graphed in a big pie chart. And Landmark can do a strong job of really trimming down that pie chart, not as a differently from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal pie chart, but as what affects Landmark the most, establishing a 3-year plan to eliminate bottled water from campus and investing in water fountains with filtration and bottle filler options. Uh, Later in this document, it suggests having a uh, internal uh, revenue stream where uh, we self-tax the people who purchase water bottles and other types of plastic beverage containers, and using those funds, those self funds, to uh, build the infrastructure for these water bottle filling stations as part as the capital plan. Furthermore, while this definitely falls into this category, definitely falls into um, ESG and also the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Um, this action has not been yet developed or directly implemented into any of Landmark's strategic plans as a item that has been followed through with. Whether this is um, too ambitious or just not a prioritized item um, is up to you. But the student government has recently um, asked for water bottle filling stations to be added into the capital plan, and it is slowly once again becoming a priority. Um, Landmark does have a contract with a beverage company and beverage distributor, and um, figuring out or setting goals with that distributor and being able to negotiate um, what types of containers or what products are sold to Landmark should be something that is taken into consideration when developing these plans, as far as being a good steward to both ESG goal planning in that model and in the uh, the sixth and the 12th goal of the United Nations Sustainable Development Plan. And that even can expand into the third, second, and first categories within that, as due to the nature of plastic. So, as far as the 12th goal, uh, responsible consumption and production of products in production. So, establish a sustainability through recycling program across the college. So, I do not know off my hand, as there aren't any strong records, public records, that say what the uh, landmark solid waste and waste stream um, used to be prior, or does or that information isn't directly tracked, but a lot of more effort can go into how Landmark develops its recycling and solid waste management program. Um, as of 2018, 2019, through lobbying by students and um, state mandate, Landmark has started to practice composting. Um, but how solid waste is um, taught on campus and how it is implemented can be more improved to better um, have separated streams of what things are um, recycled and thrown away, and also separating items, as well as having less solid waste bins and more big bigger solid waste management stations where students can bring and have diagrams and are taught how to sort their recycling. Um, I want to say that a source, um, Erica Loveland from 2018, 2019, also had their capstone about how the school can go about solving the problem of solid waste management. And while their capstone primarily focused on a specific product such as glass and how glass can better be recycled and how that is also used in other products such as building roads. The college can do much better in teaching people how to do recycling. And her capstone focused on in detail on how different educational programs can happen, but I research shows that educational programs aren't enough in having the physical infrastructure of uh, where bins are located and how big bins are, and maybe students not having access to dumpsters can go a long way in both teaching people how to sort their solid waste and also distributing post landmark where that solid waste ends up. And that falls within the ESG goals, and it is told much more directly through the UN Sustainable Development Goals, especially in a way of how to solve the problem of um, solid waste management. So I give them a lot of credit in what they did for their capstone, but I do think that more can be done institutionally by the college. Moving on to social goals. So, um, a lot of the social goals tend to focus on around how the college can communicate and be transparent with their goals and actions around sustainability and how things such as less siloing can occur in these communications and how education can be tailored in to the curriculum as far as educational awareness. I am a heavy critique about sustainability education and how it's done, and I believe that society should better create institutions that directly fix the problem rather than educating people around the current problem of things such as solid waste management. Um, to broadly go over steps um, in this section, it talks about steering groups and organizing efforts, but does not give specific goals in mind. Um, as a general criticism of the ESG goals, uh, they can be very broadly implemented, but not heavily followed through with. Um, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they can be used to uh, teach about different things. And one thing that's not necessarily talked about in the social goals is how it affects members of the internal landmark community and how it affects um, members of outside the landmark community. And it can be more specific in things that can be done. So establishing comprehensive outdoor spaces. Um, Again, it makes a statement but does not specify in goals that are set out by that. Um, my biggest one that I like in this section, which I don't think makes sense at all in this section, uh, talks about a lot about biodiversity and allocating funding for a multi-year landscape and greenscape master plan to improve the quality and variety of vegetation on campus and the construction of green spaces. So, what is that, you might ask? So, that is using areas that maybe are not as so developed and not as so much used, and converting them into more um, biodiverse friendly spaces. So a big offender of and challenge for this goal might be the hill. So the hill um, is very clear and keeps the view clear, but is also a big offender of the urban heat island effect and causes a lot of heat to radiate onto the campus. And uh, that can cause other problems within the environment and make the campus bring a lot of problems to the campus. And also because we are an educational institution, we should be teaching about biodiversity and how it reflects within both the natural world and the importance of conservation as part as being an educational institution. Uh, Biodiversity can also expand beyond plants and can include how infrastructure is built, what infrastructure is used to go into having green infrastructure. The biggest win for Landmark, in my opinion, is having the soccer field made out of coconut, as instead of having it be made out of plastic pellets, because plastic pellets can um, do very harmful things beyond uh, their lifespan because they are plastic, especially when it gets into runoff and the whatnot. Um, what's missing is from this goal could be um, forestry goals and how Landmark maintains its campus forest. Um, Currently, there is no forestry plan. There is experiments in the woods that there is 5 current long-term research experiments, according to Grumbine, that are happening with the campus forests, and having a plan for keeping those long-term experiments going, but also um, how we want to use the forest as a educational tool is very important, because we could use the landmark forest in a multitude of ways, whether if it's teaching conservation, primarily teaching education, if it can be used as recreation and biodiversity, and also risks associated with biodiversity and biodiversity planning. So in 2024, New England had a lot of late winter, well, early early winter wildfires um, that were and also along the mid-Atlantic. And compared to some parts of the country where cleaning of forest floors does occur, um, New England doesn't practice that as much as it could have, and can into the future. And uh, th- forest fires are both a natural and a natural way of nature responding to different things in the environment. They do reoccur and they do help forests grow. And broadly speaking, there are many pros and cons to what we can do and how forest fires affect the forest and also bring biodiversity, but also greater climate risks associated with lots and lots of forest fires. Um, Also, smart forestry and timber can be an open conversation to use of, is logging okay or is logging not okay? Well, not logging, but forestry properly managed. Um, Forestry can be a way that Landmark can actively teach how to use a forest, and that can also be outsourced to maybe other organizations such as maybe like Yale or Harvard Forest, and being a greater member in teaching how forestry works, especially given the large amount of campus forest we have. That's probably enough for talking about forests, but it's just interesting how so that is a planning item, but also a infrastructure item, and it does not necessarily make sense under um, that section. Improving HVAC technologies. Um, this goes back to what I said about Landmark and the trustees board creating a um, infrastructure working group to focus on the long term capability of our buildings and infrastructure. Um, College was built in the 1950s and 60s, and so um, infrastructure does age out and needs to be replaced. HVAC systems are very important to that. Moving forward, integrating the Chartwells, who is our current food contractor, and also the bookstore into where we source food and how we feed our community and be a member of our community is very important. Um, Supporting local agriculture doesn't just mean um, having one or two items, it means looking at a particular item and that might be popular and seeing if there is a local alternative. That way it supports the local economy, or if there's a product sold in either from either vendor, whether if it's the contractor Chartwells or um, the the bookstore, on if that item, like if it's going back to plastic, is it like a heavy plastic item, can that be um, reasonably replaced with a more sustainable item that has practical uses. um, to to think of an easy example, um, there I'll use ice cream for example. So currently, Landmark could get ice cream from anywhere for Chartwells. It could be shipped from who knows where, California, because they make the cheapest ice cream from a very large manufacturing plant. Or I will use Wisconsin for example. Like it does not make sense a for Landmark to um, focus on where food is the cheapest. It should focus on where um, creating local and sustainable food systems that benefit the local economy. So, um, with a lot of Vermont farms closing, um, having local alternatives instead of more inter either uh, within the United States or regional, having focusing on local. And having a definition for local is very important too, because there's a difference between regional and local. So currently, to use ice cream as the further example, we get ice cream from Maine from Guilford Ice Cream because it's cheap and it's regional, so that fulfills Chartwell's definition of local farm to plate because it's within the region. But because we live in Vermont and there is cows everywhere, there is definitely ice cream places in very close in Brattleboro and in New Hampshire that use um, local ice cream that we could sell as an alternative to using Guilford ice cream or maybe Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Even though Ben and Jerry's is a regional ice cream that is exported to the world from Vermont, that is an item that the school could look at, and that can go like down. You could take any item specifically and not just some items, and like go down the board and see like, oh, we can sort like having a plan for where items are sourced. Probably talked good amount of that and explaining how Landmark can be a better member. Uh, Last thing, I talked about a lot about transportation, and this item focuses a lot on transportation and finding ways around having a better ride sharing or public transportation, or different ways Landmark could work on transportation more. Um, yeah, so I think I could talk more about that, but I'm not going to because we are going to jump into economic. What are the economic factors within a ESG model? Actually, before I go back to that, so like going back to comparing ESG, um, ESG is fine with the model of having lots of um, actually no, I'm just gonna keep going, but focusing on local is a goal within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but not very outlined within the social goals of ESG. So economic, so establish and prioritize annual long-range operating capital investments tied to measurable sustainable items. So infrastructure, and infrastructure return on investment, and having serving the economic, sustainable, and cost coming and being fiscally responsible definition of sustainability, which is part of sustainability. But as far as sustainable planning, it is one factor. And this is where, because it is a fiscal item, that it might lean towards the ESG model, um, as far as responding to financial items. But it should also be more emphasized within the sustainable development goals. And that is, in my opinion, one of the bigger items that is missing from the sustainable development goals, but can definitely be summed up into different items within that. But that's just my personal big critique about the sustainable development goals, um, is fiscal management, and that falls into institutional management and partnership of goals. So that is probably the biggest critique about that. So the one thing item I would like to talk about in this system, in this in this section, is marketing the college's sustainability efforts and achievements to create a positive publicity for the college. Um, so it suggests having a, maybe it's in a different section, requests. It suggests having a dashboard, um, and having a way for the public to see and view where, um, sustainability is happening and what the school is doing to maybe achieve those sustainable development goals. Besides, um, the stereotype of any university saying, "Oh, we built this new building, and we're focusing on these academic areas and really pushing for different academic areas." Having a holistic approach to, um, both being visually available and visually transparent for a college or any organization, maybe not as much so businesses, because businesses don't like being as transparent as organizations, maybe non governmental organizations. Having those items be looked at and prioritized differently. Um, Here's the section where it talked about, having a revenue stream for, um, bottled water or plastic bottled beverages, um, as a funding mechanism in order to create more of a healthy college. Um, I really think this also could fall into social, in as far as the ESG goals. Um, it's the first time in this document that it refers to student health and student nutrition. I just find it interesting that it's also in the finance section. Moving along, this goes back to what I talked about before. I talked about it through food and how vendors are decided upon and what items are decided upon. Um, I find it interesting that it leans heavily on student advocacy when I think it can be more towards institutional management and student advocacies, because I think there's a big difference in students choosing vendors, and also even in the next section, students uh, managing paper um, consumption or paper management. So there is a big barrier and a big difference that a big barrier of what is governance of leaders and community involvement in the process, and if that is the best way to have community development in the process. um Moving down the line, um, develop a sustainable written document policy, that all documents to be printed double-sided, uh, referring back to printing. um, Moving along to different items. So to wrap things up, because I know this is a very long video, um, communication, um, having a so then talks about how this document has a plan to be used, to be communicated. Um, the goal is to be transparent. The goal is to transparently detail our objectives and improvements awareness of the college's sustainable efforts, and appeal to a wide range of interested parties, from students to foundations, who might share their support in this effort. A sustainable campus will utilize its resources in continuous and conservative manner, offering its students more value for their investment, not only based on academics, but also benefiting from learned behaviors and notions otherwise not presented. Um, as far as going back to comparing the ESG model to the sustainable planning model, um, I feel that especially the last portion of the statement um, is sort of uh, deleting weight from the entire plan of itself, um, saying it will do with it both saying it will do the utilizing resources as efficiently, but also not utilizing as many resources as could be utilized, is definitely shooting itself in the foot, because there is a difference in having a more um, conservative approach to how sustainable uh, ESG development is done, as far as how things are managed and using resources effectively, compared to sustainability, which is about using resources effectively, but also um, addressing problems that face the college, and saying having having a concise and conservative manner does not allow any room to um, be forward thinking about addressing hard problems that could arise um, in both society and for the campus itself. Um, so it also defines assessment. Um, the steering group will conduct an annual assessment of the progress of the initiatives and key performance indicators of this plan. The assessment process will inform plan revisions and give the steering group the necessary information for detailed progress reports for the college as a whole. So, unless it is measured in a different way, um, I do not know if this has occurred at all in the past, um, or if this has been maybe just prioritized to um, key bodies such as like the board of trustees of the school. Um, Overall, and comparing this document as a whole, I will scroll up to the section where it talks about uh, triple bottom line. Um, this how triple bottom line and ESG has developed over the years, and in comparison to even two articles by The Economist that first lay out triple bottom line and ESG, and how ESG has evolved over time, um, has not been able to um, stick with its goals that it intended to stick with, and gave lots of wiggle room to stray off the path and maybe not do as well in answering questions. Well, questions like questions and problem solving that revolves around sustainability. The Sustainable Development Goals, um, while while on the other hand, tend to set out a more concrete and broader picture on how to address some of these goals that a campus or society might face, um, and being able to stick with them long term has is a very huge benefit compared to um, having a bottom line that is easily changeable and um, to requote itself, concise and utilize resources in a concise and um, conservative manner is not always the best approach when it comes to sustainable development. And having any form of accountability for sustainable development is also very important, and having scorecards. And it would be a interesting follow-up project to um, have scorecards or seeing grading where Landmark has done in the sustainability plan and what it can do in going into the future. And as an overall review, I would think it would be great if Landmark were to focus on maybe either rebuilding its sustainability plan to see where it stands as far as completing some of these goals, and also what Landmark can do moving into the future as far as completing goals and also addressing different problems and challenges that Landmark or any small college or organization might face. So, um, overall, in comparing, going back to what I planned to do with this document, um, in comparing the sustainability plan with master planning and the sustainable development goals, I would say that this document could do better in being more self-accountable by laying out much more detailed goals, and also the school updating and keeping this what is quoted as a living document, and just keep updating this living document. And that is listed as one of the many communication items it pertains to. Oh no, I lost it. Where is it? Living document. Anyways, next steps would be scorecard, maybe looking at other more modern models on sustainable development, and looking at both the institutional long-term goals when it comes to some topics that might not be directly related to academics, and having a way to separate what are academic goals, what are internal goals, but also cross integrating these goals every now and then and communicating what needs to be communicated and being inclusive and who is um, in these conversations. A lot of institutions who use uh, the ESG goals in 2024 for other topics like DEI, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, could possibly use the sustainable development goals because they also achieve topics within the um, sustainable development goals, both the ESG and the DEI goals. And there has been a large, unfortunate push to remove some of these goals and not focus on addressing these problems within organizations, which is very disappointing to some. So, in summary, sustainable development is a very holistic and complex and broad problem that any organization can focus on and work on, and should be addressed. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this very long video, and I would like to have other open-ended conversations about talking about different items within this video and how any school can focus on its sustainable development. I'm really like to focus on being very detail oriented instead of just broadly talking about these items and different theoretical approaches. So I would be open to those conversations, and I have a lot to say on those conversations. Thank you so much.